Let us start this lecture with a thought process, that is, the demon of materialistic development is going to kill all life forms on this beautiful earth that can be saved only by re-establishing cordial relationship with Mother Nature through ancient environmental rules. So, if you look at in the last lecture, we basically discussed about how this environmental consciousness has been embedded on the minds of Indians, and still it is there, but it has been camouflaged by the modern materialistic way of life. But however, it is still lying inside and we need to revive it, and for that we need to look at what are the environmental policies were in ancient India and which can be helpful for us to have a cordial relationship with Mother Nature, so that we can really lead a very peaceful, purposeful and fruitful life. Now also coming back to the Vedic era, during which a lot of things were happening, because that is the ancient text we are having, and that is not the ancient in the India, but it is one of the ancient scriptures in the entire world. So, during Vedic era, people were conscious of adverse pollution effects of indiscriminate destruction of plants and forest, and therefore they had prescribed various ways to protect and clean off of the environment. Of course, that technique what they were using is yajna, but today a lot of people are doing research, and but however that has to be re-established whether that is making the environment cleaned or not, and some of the research has already been done, but some of people are accepting those facts, or some are not accepting those. More research need to be done on that front about the effect of yajnas on atmosphere. And if you look at as far as Veda is concerned, they were considering the all living and non-living parts of the Mother Nature as divine, and that is also still there in our back of our mind. And Rig Veda highlights the potentialities of nature in controlling the climate, which modern science has already proved it, and increasing fertility, improvement of human life, emphasizing for intimate kinship with nature. See, this is a very important aspect. We are human beings and also having a relationship, ambiotical or biological relationship with the Mother Nature. So, we are part and parcel of nature. Therefore, our scripture says, Mata Bhumi Putram Putibhyam. So, Atharvaveda considers trees the abode of various gods and goddesses, as I had discussed in the last lecture, and Yajurveda emphasizes that relationship with nature and animals should not be that of dominion and subjugation, but of mutual respect and kindness. That is very important aspect what we need to look at it, because we should not feel proud that we are powerful and so that we will dominate over other animals and species, and rather we should be protector of them, that of destroyer of those things. There are several Puranas which have talked about environment, how to protect it, and a lot of rule regulation kind of thing. But however, I will be quoting some of them. According to the text Vishnu Samhita, if anybody cause any harm to plants or animal, that is considered as a sin. Even purloining or stealing of parts or products of any of these living beings is considered to be a crime. But today we do not, because people do that for beautification, other thing, they just spoil the vegetations and plants, other thing that I have seen without really thinking about that they are having life. The sinner and criminal is liable to chastisement in this life and also after that, because as for our scriptures we believe in the next birth and also the previous birth. So therefore, we will have to be careful about that if we are doing any crime, and that act as a deterrent for not indulging in crime. But unfortunately, that faith has gone with the wind of this modern science and technology. So therefore, the society is in deep trouble. And the punishments of diverse nature. It can be pecuniary, corporal, expiatory, and donation. Pecuniary means related to basically paying fines. Corporal means like it can be by certain kind of punishment can be given. Expiatory, like it can do some kind of a penance kind of thing, and then so that you will rectify it. And donation, of course, you will have to pay money for the certain of specific articles or this thing to Brahmins, because they are the people who are having at that time were having educators. They were educators at the time. Also, they are taking care of the society in a very larger perspective, and they consider to be spiritual in nature. So, in scriptures, our scriptures, there are some indirect instruction too, which can be gleaned by analyzing dietary regulations. This is very unique to Indian scriptures, that you will have a control over your impulses by having certain kind of diets, because that controls your sense organs and other things. So, the use of biodiversity in different religious rites, because as I told you in the last lectures, it has been integrated with our day-to-day life through rituals, through different religious rites, such that it is not kind of considered to be a different or rules in the books kind of thing. So, that we will see as you go along. And other scriptures, namely Skanda Puran, Baraha Puran and others, prescribed unnecessary killing of animals and preservation of forest and mountains. And according to Agni Puran, an old injunction is to protect trees to earn religious merit and to ensure material prosperity of family, because family was considered to be very important in Indian society at that time, and so also the religious or the spiritual thing. Therefore, they have connected it to that so that people will follow it. And if you look at today, the sustainable is a buzzword, but in ancient time the sustainable was a part and parcel of human life in terms of technology, in terms of other activities what they do. According to William James, who has defined the sustainability as a basically consumption or employment of resource, which all other factors being equal does not cause depletion that harms the resource or the constitute a threat to the ecosystem integrity. Integrity of the ecosystem is very important. You can use certain resources, but it has to be used in a such a way that it should not affect the growth of the ecosystem what we are having. It should not spoil it any manner. So, if you look at the Indian scriptures like Vedas, Jain, text of Jain and Buddhist, Puranas, Agamas, Manusmritis and others, the most authenticate the things which we will be discussing in Kautilya's Arthashastra, has already established the principles of sustainability for long time back. It is not that something today they are talking about. And we will be basically discussing about mainly the Manusmriti, which is around something 1250 BC, and it was a very great treatise and is one of the oldest treatise about the rule and regulation what human beings should follow in a society. So, that is a very important point we should keep in mind. Also, of course, Kautilya Arthashastra is another important text what we are having today to really consider that as a part of our study what we are doing right now. So, if you look at Chanakya, was around something 370 to 283 BC, was a guru or a professor in Taxila University, and Kautilya is other name of Chanakya. He was instrumental in organizing all the people at that time and could unite also most of parts of India under political domain called Mauryan Empire under the leadership of the Chandragupta Maurya, that because at that time Alexander was invading India and he could manage to stop him in the frontier of India. And the Arthashastra by Chanakya written around 321 BC and contains provision to regulate number of aspects related to environments, which we will see some of them, not all. After that also that legacy continues. Asoka, like who is a very great emperor and who had propagated the Buddhism across the globe, he has written a lot of things about environmental protection, particularly in his edicts, and he had prohibited hunting, destroying of forests, advocated vegetarianism, and he had established hospitals not only for human beings, even for animals. Of course, Asoka was considered to do that, but according to me, it might be there much before that, particularly as you get evidence in the Chanakya's Arthashastra about taking care of animals in that treatise. If you consider the animal welfare, Chanakya's Arthashastra is basically always having consideration for appointment of high ranking officials to look after the issues related to animal welfare. If you look at, he considered to be in the three categories. One is director of forests, like of course in modern terminologies, and supervisors of animal slaughter, and superintendent of cattle, horses, elephants and pastures, because that is a very important point what they had taken care through administrative ways. And if you look at the duties of these welfare officers at the time, and also what he had prescribed in the Arthashastra, is basically protection of the reserve forest and preventing cruelty of animals and preventing poaching. Also, that was their duties basically of these welfare officers of wild animals. So, if you look at, they had provisions for taking care of elephants, because they were using elephants for warfare also, and they had formed a reserve forest for elephants. That was a ritual at that time, usual way, and capital punishment for killing healthy elephants. Not that they were not killing elephants. Suppose some elephant will go mad, they were used to kill them to protect other people. Animals within the reserve found to be harmful were supposed to be taken away before killing them. Right, that was being according to Arthashastra. These are the volumes and page number what is given. And as I told, that elephant were used for warfare also, but they were taken care very much, and so that they will be strength enough to carry out this the assigned jobs during the war. And if you look at the number of species which are threatened is around today 16,938. Large number of species are being extinct by these modern developments. And this concept was there to protect the species, and I will not tell you the list of protected species of animals, birds and fish which are being mentioned in Arthashastra and also Manusmritis, because it will be little boring to read out all those things, or to, and some of them names also we are not aware. So, in killing of such species, the protected area was punishable offence at that time, and which today also be a part of our environmental laws. And animals within the park found to be harmful, as I told earlier, were supposed to be taken away before killing them. And these some of the species I have shown here, which is basically endangered animals in the modern day in India, and some of them might not be there at this moment even, like because. And if you look at, there are several rules being framed at the time for protecting animal. If an animal is struck with a blow which causes it pain, the offender should be punished with a fine in proportion to the amount of pain caused to that animal, right? That is according to Manusmriti. And meat eater is more guilty than the slayer of animal, according to Manusmriti, that I have given volume 34 slokas. And we know nowadays drivers are very careless, and they can cause any damage to anybody, as if they are the owner of the entire road, that you can feel whenever you are a pedestrian or a cyclist or any other low level or low speed vehicle you are driving. At that time, if a careless driver of cart inflict any persons, and they will be asked to give a punishment on the fiscal. Fiscal means the money wise, who causes the death or injury of any living being, such as man, cow, elephant, camel, horse, or a small cattle, even beautiful wild quadrupeds, birds, donkey, sheep, goats, dog and pig. So, most of the animals, whatever is there, they have mentioned also, if you make any injury or you are instrumental in making an injury or a death, then you will have to pay money for that as a punishment. So, and if you look at the cow was considered revered at that time and today also, although we are not taking a cow nowadays. A cow should be protected from any sort of danger, and any injury caused to cow should be followed with penance. At that time, like people were subjected to penance by the society, because I remember when I was a kid, if anybody will try to cause any damage to the cow, then he himself or herself will be taking this penance, and if he or she won't, then the society will impose on that. So, that was a deterrent which was a part of that. And if you consider that the care for animal was a part and parcel of life. Of course, there is a rules like conservation of animals refer to non-killing of animals, either wild or domesticated, for the purpose of food or sympathy or from ethical point of view. Any point of view, you cannot do damage or to kill the animals, right? Special attention were given at that time for domesticated animals to make them free from torment. Like you might have seen nowadays, even some people are using animals for transport, other things. They are very cruel to them. It was not at that time, and for that rule were made. And this is according to Manusmriti. And Arthashastra says that even the strayed protected animals or those from the reserve forest found grazing at places and where they are not supposed to be should be driven off without hurting them. But today, like the people kill if some of the animals are entered into somebody else's territory, which is really not there at that time. We need to adopt that. And stray cattle should be driven off with a rope or a whip. People trying to attack such animals should be prevented from doing so by all available means, and those found to hurt the cattle should be fined heavily. So, Arthashastra, according to Arthashastra, and particularly for sick animals had to be taken care, and sick animals should be treated by physician. They should be given proper quality and quantity of ration as specified in their text. And I remember that Arthashastra has prescribed the particularly for elephants and other animals, what kind of ration will be provided by the king in their place. So, those things has to be followed, and herdsman should be responsible for proper care of animals, otherwise they will be punished. So, if you look at the king's duty was to protect the forest, and not only the forest, but elephants, flower gardens, vegetable gardens, fruit orchards, wheat crop fields should be protected by king. That was the duty of the king to protect this. But today, who protects whom? That is another question comes into picture. So, it is very laid down that what should be. If you look at care for tree was a part of parcel of life. Beside this, they have also formulated some rules like cutting of shoots of flowering or fruit bearing trees, or the ones which provide shade was prohibited. But today people just uproot or then cut the trees vehemently without thinking. Cutting of branches and trunk of such trees was prohibited. For beautification people are doing nowadays. And according to Manusmriti, plants are declared as conscious. See, this idea might have taken by Jagdish Chandra Bose, the scientist who was contributed about this aspect, and that was also entered into the minds of people. That's why you will have to conserve the plants, and conservation of plants refer to non-spoilage of any plant, plant part or plant product for no good purposes. You can take for a food, that is okay. You can take for your medicine, but you cannot cut it for beautification. You know, nowadays people are doing gardening, they cut it. How can you cut that thing? So you can use it. If you can use, then it is okay. And otherwise they are having life, they are also conscious about that. And care for usually neglected, like damage to even bushes, creepers wearing flowers, fruits was also penalized. Right? Today people are doing without thinking what they are doing, but they do. So if you look at it, is not that isolated rule and regulation which are there in the textbook or maybe something law books, but it was important, was given for the human society, because human society is an integral part of environment, and any society without proper civic order or the rules cannot be an ideal society. So therefore the civic rules were being framed, and it has been injected into the mind, into their rituals, into their customs, into their life, so that they will follow it. The glimpses of what was the idea of civic order in ancient India can be seen in Chanakya treatise, Arthashastra, and also the Manusmriti and various Puranas. Because if you look at the earlier days, the temple were the learning center for the mass of the people, who are being educated how to live a life without really not affecting the environment adversely, rather live with the environment peacefully. So therefore these Puranas were playing a very important role for them to get into the psyche. Unfortunately today we do not have that education system. Temples are not become center of learning, they have become center of money making machines, money making system. So that is a sad part of it, and it deals in detail with civic order required to be implemented in the state, like this Manusmriti and Chanakya treatise, and there are several other scriptures which are talked about it. So Chanakya's Arthashastra on civic sense, if you look at, it is basically includes the three aspects. One is town planning, waste disposal, protection of trees and animal life, protection of public properties was very important. So all are being taken care. Some of them will be just touching upon, because it is not possible to really discuss it at length due to the paucity of time. And let us look at the approach taken in Arthashastra to maintain civic orders aims at a precaution rather than solution, rather than the solution in the sense solution will be evolved out of it, but the precaution is more better than even the implementing that, because right to the pollution of water bodies, atmospheres and environment in general. That means they were formulating the laws, rituals and together and rights such that the pollution of whatever the atmosphere and environment in general are being taken care by the people at large. Of course, when the people won't take care, then the law implementing agencies like king and other administrator will be taking care of that through punishment. So let us look at these aspects one by one. We will be looking some of them, not all. If you look at how they were supposed to achieve the civic order, as I told, is the town planning and the protection of common resources and waste disposal. And if you look at houses where should be constructed in such a way that there is a sufficient space between neighboring houses, but today it is not, and we do not really keep the space for plantation and other things, and all the space we are using for making houses, and we are rather encroaching the road so that it will be free for us, and that is the thing what is going on today, and which is very unfortunate. And parking spaces, fireplaces, water storage, grinding mills, threshing devices should be placed sufficiently away from the boundaries of the houses, so that they will be, other people will not be disturbed, and then people will be at peace, right. That is a very important aspect what is not being done today. And if you look at town planning, when people are doing, they are being taking care such that construction of outside projecting staircases, ladders, ditches, water channels near the houses should be avoided. Rather, it was not being done at that time. I've just shown, like in the street in Sisupalgarh in Odisha, which is a very ancient street what people have excavated. You can see the roads are quite wider, but if you look at this street in modern day Varanasi, is so narrow that you cannot think of. So that is the things what we are doing today, but earlier the people were not doing that. Any conflict between house owners should be solved by mutual consensus rather than going to the court and then doing that. Today a lot of people are involved in court cases, and the advocates and other people are just swindling them, and they are also getting a lot of pain in the process. Worries and lots are being thrust upon them, and due to their indulgence in this kind of conflict going to. So if you look at waste disposal, I will be now discussing little bit about Manusmriti is what they say. Manusmriti says that garbage like hair, ashes, bones, potsherds, cotton seeds, chaff are not to be dumped in public places, and one should avoid to step on over such places where it can be disposed of. And but today what we do is we just keep on the street. If you look at this street I have shown here, how people are shamelessly place these garbages as if they are not part of it. They are part of it. So urination on public road, on ashes, in a cow pan, plowed land, in water facing to fire, in a ruined temple, in ant hill, or in holes inhabited by living creatures, or on a hilltop should be avoided as per the Manusmriti. And waste products like urine, ordure, water used for washing the feet, water from the bath, remnants of food should be made transfer far away from the dwelling place. What do? We just dump by the side of other's house, and then and also on the road. See, this small things we do not do that, and we think that the government should do, and then that is the thing. So that should enter into our mind. And filthy substance like urine, feces, saliva, cloth defiled by impure substances, blood, poisonous thing, and any other substance considered to be impure should not be thrown to water bodies. But what do? We just put, and that became a part of our rituals nowadays, and people do not understand what they are doing. It is being not only prohibited in Manusmriti, I remember that it is also prohibited in Vedas, right? In Prithvi Sukta he has talked about. And he who draws filth on the king's high road should be fined and asked to clean immediately. Under the condition of urgent necessity, this punishment is relaxed for an aged old man or a pregnant woman or a child. There is a relaxation for this kind of people who may not be penalized that much, or maybe relaxed. So if you look at throwing disposal, throwing of dirt and collection of wastewater on the road was prohibited and punishable according to the Arthashastra. And urinating, defecating in the around holy places, water bodies, royal properties was prohibited and punishable by law according to Arthashastra. Household wells, water courses, and dung hills should be placed at a specified location, right. At that time also the people were having compost, that is the cow dung hill they were making, so that they can use for the as a manure. But that should not be kept nearby the houses, it will be little far away. Flow of water channels during the rainy season should not be obstructed by anybody, and this is according to Arthashastras. I have not mentioned here, but it is Arthashastra. But if you look at what we are doing today, Even that stray animals are affected by these plastics and other garbages we are putting. So we are doing really not only spoiling our health, we are also spoiling the health of other animals and water. If you look at, lot of filthy substances are placed on this water, which probably I have taken from the Ganges, which is the holy river according to us. So that is the thing what we are doing, disposal of dead bodies. Dead bodies of domesticated animals were not allowed to be disposed anywhere in the city. It has to be far away in the allocated places. And I have just shown you a cremation ghat in Banaras, how badly it is just by the near of the Ganges or the river Ganga, because the people call it as holy, but they are spoiling the holy river. And human dead bodies were supposed to be carried through the prescribed route to the location of designated for their cremation or burial, not that you will take the way you want. So that is the things what according to Arthashastra we should follow, and also it should be kept, and people should be educated why they should not do that. And it is not only the individual, the community is very important. And that community feeling today is not there, because people think they are independent with the materialistic prosperity. But people can never be independent, they cannot be dependent, they can be dependent. Rather, I will put, we are all interdependent. That philosophy, the concept we should keep in mind. Everyone had to contribute his share for the building of community facilities, which is today not there. We want to use it, but we don't want to contribute. Preventing others to lawful use of those facilities was prohibited, and damaging such facilities was punishable offence at that time. Even today it is there, but we don't follow it. Sheds, courtyards, latrines, fireplaces, places for pounding grains, all open places were regarded as common property, so that people can use it together. It's not that it will be used by some people alone. So when you look at these Arthashastras and Manusmritis and other Puranas, you will find there are several rules which are there for the environmental protections. Of course, it has not been mentioned it is for environment, but however you can glean through it and find out that is for environment. And let us look at what are the basic tenets of these rules which are being talked about in this manuscript, in this text or the scriptures. The ancient laws are basically ethical, mostly educative, to be implicated from biological, social, physiological and philosophical point of view, enriching the environment to be considered in total. It is not separate, right? It is a part of our life. So that is being considered from all aspects. These laws originated in three forms, what we can couch it into. One is ethical dictum, or those laws were presented in a form of advices and code of conduct not to commit any environmental sin or any sin even from society point of view. I am not talking about the environmental rules. And offensive dictums, if you look at their anti-environmental activities, are declared as punishable, and punishment was also prescribed in those scriptures. Like, and self-restriction dictum is very vital for a society to be a participatory in nature and taking responsibility for that. And a committer of environmental sin is asked to undergo penance for prevention of committing a mistake, not to repeat the activities subsequently, to create a self-consciousness, self-humiliation on account of coupled with a guilty feeling. See, it is a guilty feeling is been embedded into their mind, that if you commit this thing, because you will get a punishment either in this birth or in the next birth, because we believe in the rebirth. So, and it is a part of that they will take the penance themselves. And another way is that if they are not doing, their family members will take care of it, or ask them or casual them to take. If their family is not taking it, the village or the community will ask them to undertake, so that it become a deterrent for others not to commit such kind of mistakes, and they will feel self-pity for that, because it is a part of their life. So let us look at this thing has happened that period. In the medieval periods, what happened? If you look at Mauryan and the Guptan empires and other things, the environmental protection was very much there. And it is not only the Mauryan and the Gupta empire and others like Cholas and Pandyas and other things they were doing, but the other Hindu kings also prohibited killing of animals and destruction of forest and flora and fauna. But when we started losing the control over that, particularly after the fall of Gupta dynasty, the Indian peninsula lost substantial forest and environmental plundering due to political instability and invasion of Muslims, because they were very ruthless. They are not bothered about the forest, they are not bothered about environment. Till Akbar could manage to consolidate the Mughal empire around the 16th century, and there was some order across the country, particularly the territory controlled by Emperor Akbar. And during Mughal era, no attempts was made on environment conservation, as they did not ever realize the need for it, because they were not concerned about that, and they were not aware that what is the importance. And for Mughal rulers and other officials, forest mean no more than a wooded lands where they could hunt and collect some revenue. And at that time, of course, the small scale industries were being started, so they were using some of the products from this forest. And however, there was a restriction cutting of some specific royal trees, particularly in their garden, because they were really very much enjoying the life, royal people particularly. And Mughals were not forest minded people like the Hindus or the earlier Indians. As such, they created exquisite gardens, fruit orchards, green parks round about their palaces, central and provincial headquarters for recreation purposes. Right? It was not common people who were being encouraged, they were aware. Of course, the other people could have learned from that, that is another thing. But they were not basically interested in developing forest or protecting forest. But during the time of Sher Shah Suri, the period between Babur and Akbar, who ruled over this country for a very short period, he had done some work. The plantation of trees along the Delhi and Patna highway was being undertaken, and so also the development of road, the Patna-Delhi highways. And lot of water bodies also was being revived by the Sher Shah Suri, which were there since the time of Emperor Asoka and also Mauryan Empire, like Chandragupta's. Later on Guptas also developed, but it was all dilapidated condition. He tried to revive. That is a great thing he did according to me. And unlike the elephant forest of Mauryas, Mughals selected different areas of imperial hunting grounds in different provinces. And this whatever I am going to quote, I have taken from Rangarajan Mahesh, India's Wildlife History book. And during the first 12 years of reign of Jahangir, he had killed over 17,000 animals, which included as many as 889 nilgais, 86 tigers and lions, 1,670 gazelles, antelopes. At one stage, there was about 12,000 elephants in the possession of Emperor Jahangir. Of course, this number I may attribute, they might be using it for warfare, what also the Mauryans had doing. But this data I have taken from Rangarajan Mahesh, their book. And Gupta period 269 witnessed a distribution of forest, whereas the Mughal period witnessed continuous destruction of both flora and fauna in the subcontinent for timber and clearance of green cover for cultivation. Because the Mughal rulers had developed a lot of about the agriculture, and they were trying to generate revenues through agriculture. So, they have taken lot of land for cultivation purposes, and they had also started at, as I had mentioned, a small scale industries to generate more revenues. So, therefore, they were also using the forest materials for that. But however, Marathas and Gonds, when they took over some of the lands from the Mughals, they planted mangoes, other useful trees along their marching routes, halting places. some of which are still surviving according to some researcher. And the Mughals were only indifferent to the forest or the flora and fauna. However, the early British administration were predators. That means they were just vouching on them as destroying it. The only concern of the early British administrator in the Indian forest was to secure big supplies of teak and other timber for the Royal Navy and other business activities. Of course, I feel that it is maybe Mughals might have started, but the British people did it more vigorously. So, no steps were taken for the forest protection, conservation except its exploitation. And keep in mind that there is a rule which was promulgated by Britishers to drive the Adivasis, Banvasis from this land which are being from the forest, which are being protected by them, and they were also using them. It's not that they were the product miserly without really spoiling it. In latter part, the British people also developed the mixed forests, like developed the forest which are having single species. Earlier days, the forest means various species were there, and these mixed forests were replaced by single species commercially valued trees such as teak, sal, pine, deodar, just to retain India as a supplier of cheap raw materials and a market for a higher price manufacturing goods. So that they were very commercial in mind, and naturally the forest will be basically the having trees of varieties. The biodiversity is being maintained. This is monoculture what they have brought in, and that has really created the imbalance in the ecosystem. So, and the British officers and soldiers in the cantonment were encouraged to spend their vacation acquiring more trophies in killing animals. Look at this. That means if those officers could manage to kill animals in the forest while they are on the recreation, they will be given hours. And then naturally people, then they were having gun, and then this atrocities on the animals. As a result, we lost a lot of animals during this period. I will just give you some data which I have taken from this book written by Rangarajan Mahesh, India's Wildlife History. Over 80,000 tigers, more than 1,50,000 leopards, 2 lakh wolves were slaughtered in the 50 years from 1875 to 1925. So, these are basically data which are taken, and these may be official data, but there might be several of them which could have been slaughtered, could have been killed without any account of it, So, that is the thing what happened, that naturally we lost everything in the process of that. So, primary aim of Britishers was to utilize the resources of colony to meet the industrial requirements in their home country and administrative expenditure in the colony. There basically was to do business and then plunder our country. And they formulated forest policy 1894 and took away the rights of tribal dwellers of the forest, as I had mentioned earlier. And till today also I think that rule is being followed in India, unfortunately. I may be wrong, it might have changed, but if it has changed, it is a great thing. But it must be changed according to my own judgment, because the Adivasis are the people, the tribal dwellers should be a part and parcel of the forest, and they should be taught not to spoil the forest, rather consider them as a mother and use the resources. In 1864, first Inspector General of Forest was appointed for resource exploration, forest fire protection and assessment of growing stock. See, look at, these are all commercial things. They were having more interest in the business. Of course, it is a good thing they had developed certain technologies and ways to protect the forest from fire damage. That is a good thing, but their main motive was to commercialize, to make money. And in 1972, if you look at, National Council for Environmental Policy and Planning was established and subsequently became a separate in the Ministry of Environment and Forest in 1985. But I feel that these policies people have made, it is a great thing, good thing, but however, one has to also look at our ancient policies whatever being talked about, whatever being written in the our scriptures like Manusmriti, Puranas, and the Arthashastras, and also it is there in the minds of the people, has to be considered in formulating the policies instead of just propagating the ideas given by the earlier British rulers and those policies, and also the policies being talked about in the Western countries. We need to relook at fundamentals and then modify those policies, and it should be a part of our life, not that it will be remain in the law books. So, in 1993, the Environmental Action Program was formulated to improve the environmental services, integrating the environmental consideration into development program. See, this is the problem what I find, that people think development means materialistic development, means business and then commercialization. Whenever you do too much of commercialization, then the problem arises. So, therefore, we need to integrate these programs and policies related to environment such that the people will take care of it and people will be educated. It need not to be spoiled by the demons of development. And National Environment Policy was formulated in 2006 for environmental protection in a comprehensive manner to identify causes of land degradation, finding out the remedial measures to restore it. Of course, a lot of work has been done, but the way people are looking today to protect the environment is basically without really much knowledge and the ground reality what people are having and what they want to have, and also people should be educated. And this land degradation is basically looked at from the agricultural point of view and also from the environmental damage being done by the modern science and technology and also the businesses what is going on. But however, one has to look at the fundamental aspect of how to re-acclimatize or reclaim the land and also refurbish it in a more natural way, which will take more time, because people are trying to have a faster development, and more the faster development we want to have, then naturally we will be having more problems of spoiling the environment, because anything fast one wants to do, then we will be in deep trouble. So, rather we need to understand the underlying principles on which the mother nature works and work in unison with the mother nature. Some of the solution which were offered is basically being enumerated here. The adoption of both science based and traditional land use practices. Now, people thinking that science means modern science. It is not that ancient India was having any science, they were having, but the traditional land use practices has to be restored. It is a good part that government of India has considered that, but unfortunately the traditional land use practices are not being implemented, although it was being done in 2006, that is something 12 years back. If you recall, I had mentioned about how the land were being classified according to the uses, particularly in villages, the land for pasture, land for your water bodies, land for temple, land for forest, land for houses. So, those things has to be implemented and to be a part of the new rules what we are having, and also it will be communicated well to the people. The pilot scale demonstration of policies what has to be done, but what one has to demonstrate it, one has to look at it, because when you talk about that thing, particularly in rural areas, even in urban areas, this has to be done. The model has to be created such that how you can live a life in unison with the mother nature, not damaging the nature. but rather in a developing a symbiotic relationship with it. Adoption of multi-stakeholder partnership, these are according to me basically stakeholders and other things is part of a business, but one has to also look at the partnership that we will have to see that we are a part and parcel of nature. So that has to be enter into the minds of the people, and promotion of agroforestry and environmentally sustainable cropping patterns, adoption of efficient energy irrigation techniques, which has to be naturally being made, not with the modern irrigation techniques, spoils the process, imbalance, creates imbalance in the nature. So agroforestry is basically, it's not the forestry is important, rather we will need to go back to the village forest, where like you will have to protect the forest so that you can have face the problem of global warming and climate change. You can deter, you can really take care of that by developing. Let me conclude what we can learn from this discussion, that Indians had formulated environmental laws to overcome the problems of pollution, contamination and biodiversity, and we need to relook at in modern eyes and see that how we can adopt. Ancient environmental laws were more of ethical significance, as they could mold the people not to commit any offense against the ecology or the environment. These ancient laws had an option to undertake penance to realize the misdeeds and would not repeat them in future by self-realization and also by social pressure. The king was also authorized to punish the offenders acting against the laid down environmental rules. Today we do not have king, we are having the rulers, democratic way elected rulers are supposed to take care of that along with the officers. So industry that spoil environment cannot be beneficial for humankind, therefore we need to also develop such kind of thing, and it is important that before really establishing the industry, we need to take care so that whatever the damage little being made by the industries should be separately being replenished by planting trees and other measures, so that ecological imbalance won't be there. So we can learn a lot from our ancient environmental rules and regulations and adopt that, so that we can rejuvenate the environment for the betterment of our entire humankind. Thank you very much.